Hey everyone, I've been lurking on here for a while, but never thought I'd be the one posting. I guess life is a way of kicking you in the teeth when you least expect it. I'm a 34-year-old guy, and I was married to my wife, Ashley, for 8 years. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the cracks forming, but I was too busy trusting her blindly to notice. Ashley and I had what I thought was a great relationship. We met in college, fell hard for each other, and tied the knot right after graduation. She was charming, fun, and had this fiery personality that I found irresistible, at least back then. We both worked full-time, saved up for a house, and even talked about starting a family one day. You know, the typical happily ever after plan. But things started feeling off about a year ago. Ashley became distant, less affectionate, always glued to her phone, and constantly picking fights over nothing. At first, I chalked it up to stress from her job. She worked as a marketing manager and often complained about her demanding boss and crazy deadlines. I tried to be supportive, offering to cook more, clean more, and give her space. But the more I tried, the colder she became. Then came the late nights. Ashley would stay out working on campaigns with her team or go out with her friends for wine nights. At first, I didn't question it. I trusted her. I mean, why wouldn't I? But then small things started piling up. She'd come home smelling like cologne, not mine, and her explanations didn't always add up. Like the time she said her coworker Jennifer gave her a ride home, yet I found a receipt for a dinner for two at some fancy steakhouse. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off and said it was probably from a work lunch weeks ago. Something about the way she said it didn't sit right, but I didn't press. That's who I was back then, a guy who gave his wife the benefit of the doubt, even when his gut was screaming otherwise. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a storm that would rip my life apart. Things hit a breaking point about 3 months ago. It was a Friday night, and Ashley claimed she had a team-building event with her coworkers. She even left the house wearing a professional blazer and heels, carrying her laptop bag. I kissed her goodbye like a fool and told her to have a good time. But something didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the way she avoided making eye contact, or maybe it was the fact that she seemed almost too rehearsed in her explanation. Whatever it was, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. That night, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I snooped. I hated myself for it, but curiosity got the better of me. I checked her laptop, which she'd left behind. Funny how the team building required her laptop, yet she forgot it. Her emails were clean, almost too clean, but her messaging app was still open. And that's when I saw it. A message thread with someone named Brandon. At first, I told myself it could be a work thing. Maybe he was a coworker. But as I scrolled through the messages, my stomach dropped. Brandon wasn't a coworker. He wasn't even pretending to be one. The messages were explicit, filled with suggestive plans about their getaway and things I couldn't unsee. She called them things like baby and love, things she hadn't called me in years. One message stood out. Can't wait to see you tonight. I'll wear the red dress you love. Meet me at our spot at 8. Our spot. Those words hit me like a brick wall. While I was sitting at home, worried about her stress levels and making sure she had dinner waiting, she was out playing house with Brandon. At first, I froze. My mind raced, and I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was misunderstanding things, but deep down I knew the truth. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I grabbed my car keys and decided to follow her. I had to know. I needed to see it with my own eyes. I parked a few blocks away from the restaurant mentioned in one of their earlier messages. Sure enough, there she was sitting on the patio under twinkling string lights, laughing and sipping wine with Brandon. She wasn't wearing her blazer or heels anymore. Instead, she wore a tight red dress, the one she told me didn't fit anymore. My heart felt like it was being crushed in a vice. I wanted to storm over there, flip the table, and call her out in front of everyone. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel, watching the woman I'd built my life around betray me. They were holding hands across the table, leaning in close, completely oblivious to the world around them. To me, it wasn't just some fleeting fling. This was a full-blown relationship, and I was the sucker left in the dark. I stayed there for over an hour, watching them laugh, flirt, and kiss like teenagers. It was the most surreal, gut-wrenching experience of my life. By the time I got home, I felt numb. But numbness wouldn't last long. Anger was starting to bubble up, and I knew there was no going back. This wasn't just some mistake or misunderstanding. Ashley had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The next morning, I woke up with a singular goal. I was going to confront Ashley. No more excuses, no more maybe I'm wrong. I had the proof. I'd seen it with my own eyes, and I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into doubting myself anymore. Ashley came home late that night, claiming she'd been at the team-building event like she said she would. She waltzed in, looking disheveled but smug, as if nothing had happened. "Hey," she said casually, kicking off her shoes. "How was your night?" I couldn't hold back anymore. "My night? Oh, it was great, Ashley. Spent some time catching up on messages, yours to be specific." Her face froze for a split second before she recovered. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning innocence. I stood up, grabbed her laptop from the counter, and opened the message thread with Brandon. "Does this ring a bell? I'll wear the red dress you love. Meet me at our spot at 8. Her face went pale, then bright red, and she crossed her arms defensively. "You went through my messages? That's such a violation of my privacy, Ethan. Don't you dare turn this on me," I snapped. "I saw you, Ashley. I went to the restaurant. I saw you with Brandon. I watched you kiss him. Don't even try to lie your way out of this." For a moment, she stood there silent. Then she scoffed. "Fine," she said, her tone dripping with venom. "Yes, I've been seeing Brandon. So what? Maybe if you weren't such a boring, predictable husband, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere." Her words hit me like a slap across the face. "Are you serious right now? I've been working my ass off to make you happy, to keep this marriage alive, and this is how you repay me? By sneaking around with some guy behind my back." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the victim act, Ethan. You're not perfect either. You're clingy, you're boring, and honestly, I've been checked out of this marriage for a long time." Hearing her say those things felt like having my heart ripped out and stomped on. I'd always been there for her, supported her through everything, and this was how she saw me? I couldn't stop myself from laughing bitterly. "So that's it? You cheat on me because you're bored? That's your excuse?" She shrugged, completely unapologetic. "Maybe if you'd paid more attention to what I wanted, I wouldn't have had to find someone who did." At that point, I realized there was no reasoning with her. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't ashamed. She was proud of what she'd done, as if she was justified in tearing our marriage apart. "Congratulations, Ashley," I said, my voice cold. "You've officially destroyed everything we built together. I hope Brandon is worth it because as far as I'm concerned, we're done." She smirked, almost as if she'd won some kind of sick game. "Oh, trust me, Ethan, he's worth it. And honestly, you're better off too." I didn't say another word. I walked out of the room, grabbed a bag, and started packing my things. If she thought I was going to stick around and let her treat me like this, she had another thing coming. But even as I packed, my mind was racing. This wasn't just going to end with me walking away. No, Ashley wasn't getting off that easy. She wanted to play games? Fine. Two could play that game. After Ashley's little tirade, I left the house and stayed with my brother Jake for a while. Jake's always been the practical one, the guy who sees things clearly when everyone else is blinded by emotion. He listened as I unloaded everything. The betrayal, her smug reaction, the complete lack of remorse. "Man," he said, shaking his head, "that's cold. Like ice in her veins cold. I don't know how you kept it together during that conversation." The truth? I barely did. Inside, I was crumbling. The woman I'd loved, trusted, and built a life with had not only betrayed me, but acted like I was the problem. At first, all I felt was rage, a burning anger that kept me up at night. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her and Brandon laughing at me. But the rage didn't last forever. Once it burned out, it left something worse, sadness. A deep, hollow ache that settled in my chest and refused to leave. I kept replaying our entire relationship in my mind, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. Was it me? Had I been too blind? Too trusting? Or had she just been hiding her true self all along? Jake tried to pull me out of the spiral. He took me out for drinks, forced me to hit the gym with him, and even suggested therapy. "You need to talk to someone who can help you make sense of this," he said. He was probably right, But at the time, I wasn't ready. Instead, I threw myself into work, hoping to distract myself. But even that didn't help. Every little thing reminded me of her. The coffee shop we used to go to, the songs we used to listen to, even the stupid movie quotes we used to throw at each other. And then, there were the rumors. A few mutual friends started reaching out, asking if it was true that Ashley and I were taking a break. Apparently, Ashley had been telling people that we were growing apart and needed time to figure things out. Growing apart? Figuring things out? The audacity of her lies was mind-boggling. She wasn't telling anyone the truth, that she'd been sneaking around with Brandon for who knows how long. One of the hardest moments came when I ran into her at the grocery store about 2 weeks after the confrontation. She was there with Brandon, laughing like they didn't have a care in the world. She spotted me, gave me this smug little smile, and walked right past me without a word. That was the moment I realized just how much she enjoyed watching me hurt. She wasn't just a liar or a cheater. She was cruel. The encounter left me spiraling again, but it also sparked something else inside me. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to be the broken, defeated man she probably expected me to be. If she wanted to act like her betrayal was no big deal, fine. But I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. That's when the idea of revenge started to take root. It wasn't about being petty or childish. It was about showing her that actions have consequences. She wanted to burn my life down? Fine. I'd make sure she got burned too. But I had to play it smart. Ashley might have underestimated me, but I wasn't going to underestimate her. If I was going to get even, I needed to make sure it counted. I spent the next few weeks planning. This wasn't going to be some impulsive, petty act of revenge. I wanted something calculated, something that would hit Ashley where it hurt the most. I didn't just want her to feel embarrassed or guilty. I wanted her to regret every single decision that led her to betray me. The first thing I did was dig into her secrets. Ashley wasn't exactly the most careful person, and during our marriage, she'd let slip a few things she probably shouldn't have. Like how her job at the marketing firm wasn't as secure as she made it seem. She was always complaining about her rival, Linda, who she claimed was gunning for her position. Turns out, Ashley had been fudging some numbers on her reports to make herself look better. I kept that little nugget of information tucked away for later. Then there was Brandon, Mr. Perfect. I started doing some digging on him too. It wasn't hard to figure out where he worked. Ashley had mentioned it in one of her text exchanges. Brandon worked in sales at a tech company, and from what I could gather, he had a bit of a reputation. A few old posts on social media painted him as a guy who liked to mix business with pleasure, if you catch my drift. Armed with this information, I set my plan in motion. First, I anonymously tipped off Ashley's boss about the discrepancies in her reports. I attached screenshots of her emails and documents I'd quietly saved over the years, enough to make it clear that someone had been playing fast and loose with the numbers. It didn't take long for the fallout to hit. One afternoon, I got a call from a mutual friend who still worked at the firm. "Dude," he said, barely able to contain his laughter, "you'll never guess what happened. Ashley got fired today. Apparently, Linda exposed her for cooking the books. She was escorted out of the building by security." I had to bite back a grin. Step 1. Complete. Next, I turned my attention to Brandon. I wasn't just going to let him get away scot-free either. Using a fake email account, I sent an anonymous message to his company's HR department, outlining his extracurricular activities with female clients and coworkers. I even attached screenshots of suggestive social media posts and some damning conversations Ashley had shared with him. It wasn't long before Brandon found himself under investigation. Rumor had it he was put on leave while HR sorted through the mess, but I didn't care enough to follow up. The point was his perfect little world was starting to crumble just like mine had. But the cherry on top? The final act of revenge? That came when I put the house up for sale. Ashley had always loved our house, bragged about it to her friends, and treated it like her personal trophy. What she didn't realize was that the house was in my name alone. I'd bought it before we got married, and thanks to a smart prenup, she had no claim to it. I didn't tell her about the sale. I let her come by one afternoon to pick up some things and find a giant for sale sign planted in the front yard. The look on her face was priceless, shock, rage, and panic all rolled into one. "What the hell is this, Ethan?" she demanded, storming up to me. "Selling the house," I said calmly. "Figured there's no reason to keep it now that I'm moving on." "You can't just sell the house," she shouted. "This is our home." No, I said, barely able to keep the smirk off my face. It's my home. Always has been. And I'm done letting it remind me of you. She stormed off, but not before throwing one last jab. You're pathetic, Ethan. You think this makes you the bigger person? You're just as petty as I thought you were. But as I watched her drive away, I didn't feel petty. I felt free. Step by step, I was taking my life back and making sure Ashley and Brandon felt every bit of the chaos they'd caused me. And I wasn't done yet. Once the house was sold, I moved into a smaller, more modern apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't extravagant, but it was mine, and it was free of memories tied to Ashley. I'd poured so much into our marriage, into trying to make her happy, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to focus on myself. This was my chance to rebuild, and damn it, I was going to do it right. Word about Ashley's downfall spread quickly through our circle of friends. A few people reached out to me, offering sympathy or asking for the real story. Most of them had already heard Ashley's version, which was predictably filled with lies. She was telling everyone I'd been controlling and emotionally distant, conveniently leaving out the part where she'd been sneaking around with Brandon for months. I wasn't about to stoop to her level, but I didn't hold back when people asked directly. She cheated. I'd say flatly. She lied and I found out. End of story. It was amazing how quickly her supporters vanished once they learned the truth. Brandon, on the other hand, wasn't faring much better. Last I heard, he'd lost his job after the HR investigation uncovered more than a few policy violations. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who had a bone to pick with him. Several of his former coworkers had filed complaints about his behavior. Ashley tried to play it cool, pretending like nothing was wrong, but I could see through her facade. Without her job, her reputation, or her golden boy, she was scrambling. She even tried reaching out to me a couple of times, though I ignored every single text and call. Then, a few months later, I got the email. The subject line read, "The truth." At first, I didn't want to open it. I didn't need more of her lies or manipulative nonsense clogging up my inbox. But curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I clicked on it. What I found inside wasn't what I expected. Ashley poured out a long, rambling confession, claiming that she'd made a mistake, that she'd been lost and confused when she cheated. She said Brandon had turned out to be nothing like she thought, and that she realized she'd thrown away the best thing in her life, me. She begged for a second chance. "I know I don't deserve it," she wrote, "but if there's even a small part of you that still loves me, please let me prove that I can be better. I'll do anything, Ethan. Just give me one more chance." I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Anger, disbelief, even a twisted sense of satisfaction. She'd dug her own grave, and now she wanted me to pull her out of it? No, not a chance. I closed the email without replying and blocked her address. She didn't get to crawl back into my life just because hers was falling apart. That moment was when I truly felt free. I wasn't just moving on physically. I was finally moving on emotionally. Ashley's lies, betrayal, and cruelty no longer had power over me. She was just a chapter in my life, and I was ready to turn the page. But the best part? I wasn't done rewriting my story. Ashley had taught me a hard lesson, but it was one I wouldn't forget. And if she thought she could manipulate me into giving her a second chance, she clearly underestimated just how far I'd come. This was just the beginning of my new life, and I was going to make sure it was a damn good one. Just when I thought I'd closed the book on Ashley, life decided to throw another curveball my way. A few weeks after the infamous email, I received a message from one of Ashley's former coworkers, a woman named Lauren. We'd met a few times at company events, and she'd always seemed polite, though not overly chatty. Her message caught me completely off guard. "Hi, Ethan," it began. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think you need to know something. It's about Ashley and Brandon. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but after everything that happened, I feel like you deserve the truth." My first thought was, what now? I'd already pieced together most of their affair, or so I thought. But Lauren's message hinted at something deeper. We ended up talking over the phone that evening, and what she revealed left me stunned. Apparently, Ashley's relationship with Brandon wasn't just a workplace fling that spiraled out of control. It had been going on for nearly 2 years. 2 years of lies, sneaking around, and pretending everything was fine while I was none the wiser. But that wasn't the worst of it. According to Lauren, Brandon had a habit of targeting married women. Ashley wasn't even his first affair partner, just the latest in a long string of conquests. He'd bragged about it to a few coworkers, claiming he enjoyed the challenge of breaking up marriages. "Ethan," Lauren said, her voice heavy with regret, "we all saw it coming, but none of us knew how to warn you." Ashley was bragging about him like he was her soulmate, and Brandon, he just saw her as another notch on his belt. Hearing this sent me into a whirlwind of emotions all over again. I thought I'd already hit rock bottom, but this new information opened up old wounds I thought had started to heal. I couldn't believe that Ashley, for all her bravado and cruelty, had been nothing more than a pawn in Brandon's twisted game. But then Lauren dropped the real bombshell. "There's one more thing," she said hesitantly. "Ashley's been telling people she's planning to sue you for emotional damages. She's saying you caused her undue stress by sabotaging her career." I nearly dropped the phone. Swimmy? After everything she'd done? The audacity was almost laughable. Almost. I knew Ashley was vindictive, but this was a new low, even for her. She'd ruined our marriage, lied to everyone around her, and now she wanted to blame me for the consequences of her own actions? It was so absurd I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. But one thing was clear. This wasn't over yet. If Ashley wanted to play dirty, I was ready. I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her, no matter how many lies she spread or lawsuits she threatened. I called my lawyer the next day and laid everything out. Her infidelity, her lies, her threats. He assured me that her case wouldn't hold up in court, especially with the mountain of evidence I had against her. Still, I couldn't help but feel like I was gearing up for another battle I hadn't asked for. But this time, I wasn't going to let her catch me off guard. If Ashley thought she could manipulate me or intimidate me into submission, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. This wasn't just about defending myself anymore. It was about standing up for the life I was trying to rebuild. And if she wanted to drag me through the mud, I'd make sure she ended up sinking in it herself. After Lauren's warning, I knew I had to stay one step ahead of Ashley. The lawsuit threats, the lies she was spreading, it was all part of her desperate attempt to maintain control over a situation she'd lost months ago. But this time, I wasn't going to let her win. I started by gathering every piece of evidence I had against her. The text messages with Brandon, screenshots of her emails, proof of her fraudulent work activities, and even bank statements that showed her using our joint account to fund her little escapades. My lawyer assured me this was more than enough to counter any bogus claim she might throw at me. But then I decided to go one step further. If Ashley wanted to play dirty, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to hit back harder than she ever expected. Through some careful digging, I discovered that Ashley had been lying about more than just her affair. Remember that crazy boss and demanding deadlines she always complained about? Turns out, she had been stealing ideas from her coworkers and passing them off as her own to climb the corporate ladder. A few of those coworkers, including Lauren, were more than willing to provide statements about her unethical behavior. This wasn't just about her personal life anymore. This was about exposing her for who she really was, both professionally and personally. Meanwhile, I got another update about Brandon. Apparently, his girlfriend, the one no one knew about, had found out about his affair with Ashley. Yes, girlfriend. The guy who destroyed my marriage was cheating on someone else the entire time. Talk about poetic justice. Brandon's life was unraveling fast, and Ashley's wasn't far behind. She'd lost her job, her golden boy lover, and most of her friends, who had finally seen through her lies. But instead of accepting responsibility, she doubled down, painting herself as the victim in every conversation. Then came the day Ashley's lawyer contacted mine. The lawsuit wasn't official yet, just a threat, but her lawyer demanded a meeting to discuss terms. My lawyer advised me to stay quiet during the meeting and let him handle it, but I had other plans. When the day came, Ashley walked into the conference room with that same smug attitude she'd had during our confrontation months ago. She glanced at me like she'd already won, like she still held the upper hand. "Ethan," she began, her voice dripping with fake sincerity, "I really didn't want it to come to this, but you've left me no choice. The stress you've caused me." I cut her off. "Save it, Ashley. You're not fooling anyone." Then I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. This is everything I have on you. The affair, the lies, the fraud at work, even the money you stole from me. If you want to go to court, be my guest. But just know, every single one of these documents will be part of the case. And trust me, you won't come out looking like the victim. Her face turned white as she flipped through the pages. For the first time in months, she looked genuinely shaken. You can't do this, she stammered. This isn't fair. I leaned back in my chair, finally feeling like I was in control. Fair? You want to talk about fair? You lied, cheated, and tried to ruin my life. The only thing unfair here is that I wasted 8 years on you. The meeting ended with Ashley storming out, her lawyer looking more annoyed than anything else. The lawsuit threat? It vanished overnight. But I wasn't done yet. I shared everything I'd gathered with the co-workers she'd wronged, ensuring her reputation in the industry was permanently tarnished. If she ever wanted another job in marketing, she'd have to start over from scratch. As for Brandon, I sent an anonymous tip to his girlfriend, complete with screenshots of his conversations with Ashley. I don't know what happened after that, but I'm guessing it wasn't pretty. Watching the two of them crumble wasn't just satisfying, it was liberating. For months, I'd felt powerless, like my life had been hijacked by people who didn't care about the damage they caused. But now, I was finally free. And the best part? I wasn't just free of Ashley. I was free of the bitterness and anger that had been holding me back. This was the closure I needed, and I wasn't going to waste another second dwelling on the past. My new life was waiting, and I was more than ready to embrace it. After the dust settled, I finally had the chance to reflect on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the revenge, it had all been like living through a storm I never saw coming. But now that the storm had passed, I could finally see things clearly. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe again. No more walking on eggshells around Ashley. No more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. My apartment became my sanctuary, a place where I could start over without the ghosts of my failed marriage haunting me. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. I reconnected with old friends I'd drifted away from during my marriage. Jake, my brother, became my biggest support system, always there with a beer and some brutally honest advice. You dodged a bullet, he'd say. Now go live your life like a guy who knows his worth. And that's exactly what I did. I started working out more, joined a hiking group, and even took up photography, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. It felt good to focus on myself for a change, to rediscover who I was outside of my relationship with Ashley. As for her, she tried reaching out a few more times, always under the guise of wanting closure or to make amends. I ignored every message. She'd made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. The final straw came when she showed up at my apartment one night, drunk and crying, begging me to take her back. I didn't even open the door. I called Jake, and he came over to make sure she left without causing a scene. After that, she finally got the message. I was done. Looking back, I realized that Ashley had done me a strange kind of favor. By tearing my life apart, she forced me to rebuild it, stronger, better, and on my own terms. She taught me to trust my instincts, to stand up for myself, and to never settle for less than I deserve. If I could give advice to anyone going through something similar, it would be this: trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is, and don't let anyone convince you that their bad behavior is your fault. People like Ashley thrive on manipulation and control, but once you take that power away from them, they crumble. And revenge? While it's not for everyone, I'll admit it was deeply satisfying to see her and Brandon face the consequences of their actions. Just make sure your revenge is smart, calculated, and doesn't cross any lines that could come back to haunt you. Now, months later, I'm in a place I never thought I'd be: happy. Truly, genuinely happy. My life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that's enough. I've learned to let go of the anger and bitterness and focus on the future instead of the past. The last time I heard anything about Ashley, she was bouncing between temp jobs and trying to rebuild her social circle. Brandon, as far as I know, disappeared off the radar entirely. Good riddance to both of them. As for me, I'm finally free. Free of the lies, the toxicity, and the person who thought she could destroy me. And I'm never looking back.